Hello everyone, it's Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at a couple of decks that I got recently into my collection. So the first one is a deck that I've been looking for quite some time, and it's ironic because it's not necessarily a difficult deck to get, except that whenever it's out of print, but it wasn't really, let's say, expensive or hard to find, but every time that I was looking for it and every time that I saw a listing, especially on eBay, I realized that the listing was for, unfortunately, a counterfeit deck. And in a couple, there's just one way to see from the photos on a listing, unless you have the deck in your hands, obviously. There's only one way to differentiate between the legitimate deck and a counterfeit deck. So it is the Friends Tarot. The reason why I think it's been really popular in counterfeit decks is because there was a period of time in which everyone was after this tarot, and obviously it was published after the Friends TV show ended. But there's always a lot of fans that really look for these kind of decks. It's obviously a niche kind of deck. But because I basically grew up with Friends, I mean, I remember experiencing Friends and watching Friends basically at the time in which it was released, season by season. And that wasn't an easy thing because back at the time I was living in the Netherlands and we didn't necessarily get American TV shows in the Dutch TV. But I had a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, where I was working, that it was really into Friends as well. And he was able to give me the DVDs that a friend of his had got out of the US. So I was very lucky to watch Friends when I was in a very similar situation or living arrangement as the characters in Friends as well, because at the time I was living with one of my closest friends and another really close friend of mine was living not across the street, but almost across the street. And we were just, early 20s. It was the same thing. We were like having dinners and chatting and going to a cafe and, spending a couple of hours after work together. And it was really, really nice. And I remember thinking that Friends was revolutionary when it came out because it really presented all of the issues and the trouble and, the things you have to overcome in your early 20s when you're starting your first serious or important job. And you have all of these issues you encounter in life when it comes to relationships as well, and life in general. And afterwards, it was a few years ago when I saw that they actually made a tarot deck out of it, I was very, very curious about it. So the way in which you can tell whether this is an original or not is that, generally speaking, the counterfeit come in a tack box. This one is not a tack box. As you can see, it's one of those boxes that has an aperture like this at the top. And so I'm sure 1000% that this is real. It also comes with an ISBN, the barcode and all of these things, but sometimes you're not seeing the photos in a listing of the back of the deck. Sometimes the photos are a bit blurred. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a counterfeit. Well, most of the time it does, especially when you contact the seller and you ask them to provide you with more photos, and they're a bit reluctant to do so. So that should raise a red flag. But I actually know very well the person that sold me this deck, and I trust it 1000%. And indeed is the real deal. So let's have a look at this deck because I am so very excited about this. I have been using this deck already. So as you can imagine, it does portray the characters from the sitcom, the TV show. I have to say they're not 100% lookalikes, but I think that there's copyright issues when you do something like that. But, even the way in which they are represented, the surroundings, obviously this is Monica's apartment, this is Monica. And I absolutely love the way in which they've chosen the different characters of the sitcom, of the TV show, to represent which cards. Because it really feels like they actually found the right way to communicate the meaning of the card. So this is a technique. I'm not gonna repeat what it says here, but you can read it. And this is Joey, and obviously he's an actor. He's in and out of jobs, and it tells about a technique in which you have to, set the mood for something very serious in the scene. And this is his technique. So smell the technique, and I think that it's really cool for the Eight of Pentacles, or Joey again for the Fool, or Monica for the Hierophant. Although for the Hierophant, I think the High Priestess is probably Phoebe, and I get it. I get it. The Hierophant with Monica, because obviously she's always following a routine, so I can definitely see that. Joy with the Devil again, absolutely. And Ross with death, because he goes through a lot of changes in his life. So I really like the way in which the creators have chosen the characters for portraying the cards. It is also a bittersweet kind of deck, because I was really impacted. I was really affected by the passing of Matthew Perry. I had just read, or probably a couple of months earlier, I had read his biography, or the book in which he was confessing to a lot of things. And it was very impactful for me. It was probably because I really relate to him, and the way in which he, in the character in the TV show, uses humor as a self-defense mechanism. And it's something that in many, many cases, it's very important for us when we watch a TV show or we read a book or a movie to relate to the characters and what they say, because most of the time what we want to see is, well, someone or something that mirrors ourselves, mirrors our lives, our situations. And that's the way in which we bond with the characters as well. I definitely bonded with each and every one of these characters, and I am really happy to say that if you have the possibility to get this deck, and please understand that you do you, of course, but I highly recommend to always get the legitimate decks, never get a fake or a counterfeit deck. I talked very often about the the ethical issues that lay with acquiring or knowingly acquiring a counterfeit deck. Of course, if it's a mistake, it's a mistake. But there are ways to know for sure nowadays, and there's a lot of people who actually say, you should look for this or that or the ISBN, or more often than not, when you see a QR code, 99% of the case, it's a counterfeit deck, unfortunately. I do recommend to please do your own research and buy the real deck. Most of the times, I know that it's in many cases it is a matter of money, of course, because the counterfeit decks are cheaper. But we're hurting the industry, and it's not a win-win situation for anyone. It's detrimental to all of us, to the tarot community, to the collectors in general. So I'm one person that is always advocating for reaching out. If you're not sure, I'm 100%. When I rehome one of my decks, if someone is in doubt, if they want to see more photos, of course, I always answer all of the questions, because I want someone to be sure 100% about what they're acquiring. So this is the Friends Tarot, and I don't know yet which oracle I want to pair it with, but I'm thinking probably the Signs of the Times oracle, which is a very simple deck. It's an oracle deck published by Hay House. Was published probably about a year ago, or just over a year ago, and it is very, very simple. And I used to pair it up with the Cosmic Cycles, and I think that is a match made in heaven. But it does give me these kind of daily life vibes that this tarot deck gives me as well. And so I think that these two would probably pair up really well together. But let's move on to the next deck. So the next deck was a bit of a spur of the moment, because again, this comes from this very close friend of mine in the tarot community here in Australia. and she was rehoming a number of decks, and I saw that she was rehoming this one. It's the Mood Tarot, sorry, the Mood Tarot. So this one comes with a subtitle, and it just cracks me up all the time. It says it's a disgustingly relatable tarot deck. It is an indie deck. I am not entirely sure 100% whether you can still find it. I hope you can. I know that Lori from Love Magic Sparkles in Singapore still had it in stock. I do know that sometimes she runs out of stock and then she restocks the deck. So it is worth checking that out. And she's lovely, so you can get in touch with her, and she will answer. She does have two small kids, so obviously, you know, she's a mom, so she might not answer right away, but she's really lovely. And if you're in Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand, I have to say the shipping rates from Singapore are excellent. Sometimes it takes even less to come to Sydney, for example, from Singapore, that it takes from Perth, which is on the other side of Australia, to come to Sydney. Now, this one is a deck that I had seen a couple of times, but not very often in Tarot Tube or in Insta Tarot. And I don't understand why. Because it's one of those decks that it's really, really funny. It's relatable, disgustingly so, or perhaps not even disgustingly so. But each and every one of these decks, if you're not of these cards, if you're not familiar with this deck, it obviously follows the RWS when it comes to the the drawings on the cards, but it adds a little bit of a sentence sometimes to the cards. And what happens is that they are aimed to make you laugh, or they're aimed to make you go, yeah, for sure, yeah, I can relate to that. Oh, this is whimsical, this is cheeky. It does have a tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude, which is something that I really like. I am a fan of humor when it's used with intelligence, and I really do believe that these kind of decks is not the only one, but this one for sure. They can really brighten up your day sometimes because they don't take themselves too seriously. Now, I have to say, this is a plastic product, so it is a plastic deck, which makes it, on the one hand, very durable. You can take it, pretty much anywhere if you want to. If you want to read by the pool, for example, because you can get water spilled on top of it and it will not damage the cards. It will not get scratched by sand, for example. So it is very durable. On the other hand, it is plastic, so you need to be aware of that. It does tend to slip everywhere. It is not the easiest deck to shuffle. It is on the larger kind of side, but that's only a couple of things that I wanted to specify that about this deck. For everything else, it's just really, really fun for me. I really like it. There's a lot of cursing or curse words in here, so I cannot necessarily read the sentences out loud, but you can read them for yourself. I really, really like the way in which it relates to the cards. It shows us that tarot is, yes, it's a serious tool. Of course, it's there for you also to do a very serious kind of path of growth. It's there for meditation, it's there for divination, and all of these very important and deep and intense things. But on the other hand, you can also play with tarot. And honestly, guys, I've been reading for 35 years now, and I can assure you, I don't always feel like being serious. I don't always feel like doing perhaps self-improvement work with tarot or, shadow work. Sometimes it's all about perhaps having a laugh, because if we don't laugh in life, then it's a pretty sad life, isn't it? I know that some of you will go, no, absolutely not for me, and that is absolutely fine, because you need to be the one choosing the deck. It needs to be resonating for you, it needs to be relatable for you, and if it's not and it's not your thing, I completely understand. In my case, I just absolutely love it. And sometimes I actually did a reading every other Saturday. I do readings for my members, and one of my member knew that I had this deck, and she was like, can you just use this deck, please, because I really need to cheer up. I need to look at things in a different way and perhaps not take everything so seriously. And it was a really great reading. And then, I thought to myself, I'm going to use this deck for my own personal readings when I feel like just laughing a little bit. So this is the Mood Tarot. The next deck it has also been on my wish list for a while, and it's still in print, it's still available, but I think it comes from, okay, I could be wrong. I think it comes from the UK. I'm not entirely sure. I could be completely wrong. So my apologies for that, if that is not the case. I did see it in a reseller in the UK, and therefore that's why probably I thought that it was produced or released in the UK. It is an indie deck. However, together with the cost and everything and the GST, it was coming to a bit more than what I normally want to spend on a deck, especially in the month of May. I found myself, due to random things like deck coming up and on Kickstarter and backing them because I really love them, or friends rehoming some of their decks, and so me taking advantage of that because I know them, and I know that the decks would have been perfectly fine. So there were a number of reasons why I actually got let's say, a big number of decks into my collection in May. That's why I'm doing this video twice in this month. I don't think that it's something that bothers me for now, but I always say, every time I release these kind of videos, I always say you need to be comfortable with what you're doing. If your collection starts to feel overwhelming, for whatever reason, it could be because of space, it could be because of finance, it could be for a number of reasons. If it starts feeling overwhelming, then please take a break. And that's, the most important thing is your mental health. And so, but I was okay with acquiring so many decks. Perhaps in June, there will not be as many. So it's always, it depends month by month. So as I was talking about this deck, this is the Tarot of Oneness. This deck is by no means new. It's been released probably a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. It is an indie deck, as I said. It's by Robin Voisey. So sorry if I mispronounced that. It is a really beautiful deck. What happened was that I saw this deck, I think I saw this deck the first time on Lisa Pepez's channel, and she did a walkthrough of this deck. And she actually got quite emotional when looking at these cards. And since I do tend to have the same reaction when I look at a very potent kind of deck, especially one deck that is very poignant, then I thought about, just doing some research on my own and deciding whether I needed it or not. And as I said, it was on my wish list for a while, but the circumstances were just not right until they were. And so I got this deck in. Let me tell you, when I got it, and I'm going to be 1000% honest with you, okay? When I got it, I was a bit disappointed. So I don't know why I was a bit disappointed, because there's no reason. I mean, it's a perfectly good production. It's a really nice cardstock. It feels like a charm. It's easy to shuffle. The colors are amazing. They are very, very brilliant and saturated. I'm sure you can see that through the lens. And it's so that there's no people. And that is neither a plus nor a minus for me. It's very neutral. I'm very neutral on people's deck. It is true that when people are very easily recognizable, I do kind of ask myself if I want to use that deck. So, for example, it is ironic because the first deck that I showed you today was the Friends Tarot, and obviously every one of those characters is recognizable to me. But generally speaking, when I know that the creator has used some of their friends, for example, or relatives or whatever, in a deck, and I know about that, I cannot separate the image that I see in the card with the notion or the idea that I have about that person. it works for the Friends Tarot because I actually base my readings on what I know about those characters. However, when it's characters that I don't know really well, it might create a bit of a cognitive dissonance. When there's no people in a deck, like the Spacious Tarot, for example, I look at, are there animals? Yes. Is there nature? Yes, which is the case, obviously, in this deck. But I don't know what it was. It didn't immediately click. I didn't fall in love with this deck when I just looked at the cards like I'm doing right now. What happened was that, again, I was doing a reading for my members, and I used this deck by request. And oh my God, I mean, this deck reads like a charm. It's fantastic. The way in which you relate to the cards, thanks to the images you see on the cards themselves, is nothing short of amazing. I really, really love it now. I have absolutely no problem in reading with this. I actually bond with the deck. The more I use it, the more I bond with it. The Seven of Wands is fantastic, by the way, because it does remind me of something that happened to me. We were diving in the Galapagos, and it was a trip of a lifetime. I can assure you the Galapagos is simply fantastic. But at a certain point, we saw, I think there were white-tipped sharks as opposed to black-tipped sharks. Please understand, I'm not an expert, so I could be completely wrong. But so we were told that they don't always attack people. And so that the way in which they, they explained that to us, they were like, yeah, you're mostly okay. And we were like, mostly? You mean mostly? So not all the time? We're not always gonna be okay? But the adventure was there, and and we were like, okay, everyone is going, everyone is doing this, let's do it. And I have to say, I was also younger, so I was also probably less bothered by danger somehow. I don't know. But in any case, so we went diving, and it was magnificent. It were not just sharks, there were turtles, there were seals as well. The water was really freezing, but it was amazing. We went there in winter. Um, the second time that I went on a dive that day, though, I had this experience in which I went by myself, no, not by myself, but I detached myself from the group, which is not something that you should do. It is actually not recommended. I made a mistake. It was my fault, and I know that. I will never do that ever again. It was because I wanted to explore a part that we haven't seen yet, and I wasn't that far away from my husband, but I wasn't, let's say, I couldn't see him after a while, after 5 minutes. The visibility wasn't perfect. And I went there, and I was by myself, and I saw at least 6 sharks. And I kid you not, they were all lined up, and they were sleeping. So I know that it sounds crazy, and I talked to people about it, and some of them that have been in several dives before, they told me, yeah, it's possible, very rare, but yeah, it's possible. It looked like it was a shark's nest. I kid you not. It was like on below, let's say, a protruding rock. And they were stationed and parked there as if they were cars. And they were just floating. And maybe they were not sleeping, but they were not moving per se, they were just floating. And that's why I thought they were sleeping. Please understand, again, I'm not an expert. I could be completely wrong, but I know what I saw. And that moment specifically, I actually felt fear. And that was the first time and the last time that I felt fear by diving with sharks. I lived for 8 years on across the ocean in Australia. We do have wobbegongs and other types of sharks. And I've seen them many times. I never felt fear. This was primal fear. I discussed about it with others when I go, but nothing happened to me. I was absolutely fine. But I did kind of swim back to the group quite quickly as I could, let's put it this way. And so it feels like that is really the Seven of Wands kind of energy. You're by yourself, but you're sticking to your guns, and I'm like, I am happy to be here. I know that I've made a mistake by separating myself from the group, but I love that I did that, because had I not done that, I wouldn't have seen this magnificent thing. And I don't know, I feel like there is this primordial fear that got to me because I was a human and I was in front of a predator. There was 6 of them and I was by myself, and I felt like I was lucky that they were sleeping, or at least they were stationary. They were not necessarily moving. By the way, it is true that sharks keep on moving. They were moving, but they were floating. What I mean by stationary, I mean, but they were not swimming around. That's what I mean with that. I don't know what else to say. Again, please don't do it. It is very dangerous. It could have ended up in a very sorrowful way. It didn't because I was lucky. But that was an incredible experience. And when I saw this card and other cards, I really bonded with this deck. And ever since it was, I don't know, 10 days ago when I got it in, I thought to myself, there is so much life in these cards. Yes, there are no human beings, but there is everything that is related to us. This, by the way, is the wave in Arizona. It's magnificent. Unfortunately, they can only let you in if you win the lottery. Literally, they call it the lottery. So you put your name up and they pick a few numbers every day. And if they pick your number, you're allowed to go. Otherwise, you're not. We didn't, but we went to a very similar place nearby. Arizona is just fantastic. See, each and every card does now resonate for me. It does tell me about myself. Not exactly in the same way as the Savvy Soul Tarot does, because you guys know, if you're watching my channel for a while, you know that is my soulmate deck. And that is full of people, but I don't mind. Somehow I can find, each and every card I can find something that relates to my life. But so it goes with this deck as well, I would say. And so ever since I started actually using it, I really, really appreciate it. So as I said, it is still available. It is not out of print, but it is an indie deck. So obviously you will have to check on the cost of having it shipped to you. And that's the Tarot of Oneness. And the next deck was just for fun. It was very affordable. Again, I got it from this close friend of mine. And you guys know that I don't necessarily have a lot of what I would call cute decks, but this one really caught my attention. So it's called the Tarot of Spells and Potions. This is a production or release by Daxaneva. If you were not familiar with Daxaneva, I think they're based out of Ukraine. I could be wrong. Apologies if I am. They do have their own website, but they also sell through a few resellers. And I think they also sell through an Etsy shop. I do have a couple more decks by Daxaneva. Some of them, so sometimes they have really great discounts, like 50% off or something like that. So I highly recommend you check them out. But do understand that in many cases, in their website especially, when it says on demand, it means that they have to print it. So I've heard a lot of people complaining about Daxaneva because they had to wait for months before getting their decks. That is different. So if it says that the deck is on stock, they ship it within 3 to 5 business days, and then obviously it depends on where you are. But if it says on demand, you may have to wait months. So that's something that I feel you should know. The cardstock of these decks, it's not the best one, okay? We know that if you're familiar with Daxaneva decks, yeah, it's not the best one. However, I have to say, this one, contrary to other decks that I've got, feels like it does have a top coat. So it is slightly more, let's say, durable and, sturdy. And as you can see, I've zoomed in already, but let me see if I can zoom in even further. So it is one of the decks that it's a witchy deck. And I really like it for it, but it's one of those decks that has a lot of really young characters, which is normally a deal breaker for me unless it's something very specific, like, for example, the Cozy Witch Tarot, which is indeed 99% very young characters, teenagers and early 20s, which makes me feel like I could be their mom, which is the case in this deck as well. However, this deck is very particular because it is full of symbols. It's very, very busy. As you can see, there's symbols pretty much everywhere. In some cards, like for example, this tower card feels like it's a bit too busy for me. But on the other hand, I actually like that it's not your typical way to present the tower card. The star card is very nice, but I love this moon card. I really, really love this moon card. It feels like there's a bit of, I don't know, the dark academia kind of vibes, someone who's drinking a hot cup of coffee and these buildings that look like, I don't know, some kind of a witchy kind of Oxford and, bats everywhere, constellation, etc. And there's a few cards that really give me that sense of fantasy book, which is, it's neither something that I look for nor something that I avoid. It's just something that this is what this deck is communicating to me right now. As I said, all of these cards are very, very busy. The art style is very, very full. There's a lot of symbols there. It reads, however, really well. That is something that I would have not expected out of this deck, I have to say. It does not show you the traditional depiction, but in a way, you always feel like you can relate to the cards and you can read them. And I don't know, it was, as I said, it was very affordable. I don't know how much it trade for right now, but it's always at the price of a mass market deck, even on the lower end of a mass market decks. And as you can see, even the backs are really, really busy. But it's a busy that somehow works for me, and I like the colors. I like, the expressions on the characters. I like the way in which, we look at the cards and we recognize them. So it reads really well, as I said. So it's a nice addition to my collection. And I love this Eight of Cups, for example, again, kind of dark academia kind of vibes. Really, really nice. So again, the title is Tarot of Spells and Potions. And last but not least, this deck is a unicorn deck for me. And it's one of those decks that it's not cheap. Let's put it this way. And it's been on my wish list for a while. I missed out. I was very stupid because I didn't back the Kickstarter from, I think it was last year, for the 3rd edition of this deck. I don't know why. Maybe it was one of those months in which I was already backing like 5 or 6 decks. I was like, I really have to choose here. But I regretted not backing in. And then all of a sudden it was again for sale in one of the Facebook groups. This is the 2nd edition and it's the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. This is, as I said, the 2nd edition. It's by M. Wotherspoon and it's based on curated art out of Odilon Redon, who was a French artist. And I have to say, I recently backed the Lenoir Oracle, which is based on Odilon Redon's lithographs. And there was a Kickstarter from probably a couple of weeks ago. They funded maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I've talked about that Kickstarter in my top Kickstarters of 2024 so far because that deck is absolutely gorgeous and it does have a bit of a dark vibe, but we also need to understand that generally speaking, Odilon Redon's artwork is a bit on the darker side, even though in many, many cards you will see now that there's a lot of very brilliant colors. But it's the style, I would say, that is slightly dark. Now it comes with these cards, which are actual oracle cards. Obviously it's a tarot deck, but it comes with 6 additional cards, which are oracle cards. So intuition, shadow. You can see what I mean by when I talk about darker vibes. Intention, which to me, this looks like the back of a tarot deck. Ancestors, such a beautiful card. Grounding, really love this card, by the way. And Spirit. And then we have a look at this deck. So This is an indie deck. It's out of print. The second edition is out of print. I have no idea what happened to the third edition. I know that it was a Kickstarter, and I think that they already shipped out the rewards, so the deck has been delivered if you did back the Kickstarter campaign. And I know that the third edition also comes with additional Oracle cards. I haven't seen the third edition, so I cannot attest to that. This one, however, is a fantastic linen cardstock front and back. It feels very durable as well, but it feels like one of those decks that you can actually use. You can definitely read as many times as you want with this one. It doesn't feel precious in the sense that you have to be careful on how to use it, even though, being a collector, I'm always careful on how to use a deck. And since it wasn't cheap, I actually, let's say, I would not necessarily use this for readings. If I had another copy, or if I get, a hold of the third edition, I would probably think about using the third edition more. This wasn't cheap, as I said, probably for 3 times already. It's just that it's one of those decks that are really, really worth it. And I have to say, it does resonate with me a lot. It feels like it's almost a darker deck, and the sense that, as I said before, the vibes of the deck are darker. And it's not just because of the colors of most of these cards, because, as I said, in many cases, there's also really bright colors, but it's the way in which the art style is actually conveying the message. It is very, very unique, very recognizable. So Lenoir Oracle is also based on Odilon Redon's artwork. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe also the Chimera Tarot, which is another indie deck, is also based on Odilon Redon, or at least one or more than one cards are based on his artwork. I have to say, though, that in many cases you will see how they produce the cards. So basically, they took the artwork, the curated artwork, and they added these symbols to obviously refer back to the card. So in this case, this is the artwork by Odilon Redon, but obviously didn't put the pentacles in here. It was the creator of the deck that put the pentacles in there, or the swords in here. For example, let me see another one. Seven of Pentacles, for example, here. So it's obviously done in such a way that it will be easy for us to recognize the cards, or the cups here, for example. But it is very talkative. It's a very talkative kind of deck. And by talkative, I mean that when you pull a card, 3 cards, however cards you want to pull for your reading, you don't have any problem in understanding the message and, in translating it and relaying it back to the person you're reading for, if it's not for yourself. It does, however, give me these dark vibes. And so I presented this deck as a unicorn deck to my members the other day. And I also, presented the pairing that I've chosen for this deck, which I'm going to show you as well now. Let me see if I have enough room. I may have to zoom out just a little bit. So I feel like this deck pairs well with the Dante's Inferno by Paolo Barbieri, which has been published by Lo Scarabeo. This is an oracle. I don't know, it just feels like it's the right oracle deck for this tarot deck. And again, I've asked my members, and I'm asking you as well, what do you think about this pairing? Because it's obviously, you made a choice. When you choose, to pair up a tarot deck that gives you dark vibes with an oracle deck that definitely has dark vibes, obviously you made a choice. So you're choosing to use these two together in a certain way. So obviously we're looking at, darker vibes. We're looking at probably shadow work. We're looking at something that is not necessarily a daily practice, or it won't be part of my daily practice. However, I can't help but feeling that these two actually work really, really well together. So I really like how I use the sentences at the bottom of the oracle, and then I expand the message with the tarot cards on the sides. This is the most popular way to accompany or to pair a tarot deck to an oracle deck. It's not the only way, but I feel like in many cases, I actually prefer to do it this way at the beginning, and then when I feel like I understand the deck a little bit more, then I will start doing perhaps just 2 cards at a time, or perhaps 1 oracle card and 3 tarot cards. It depends. But I'm asking you as well, so what do you think? Obviously, the art style is not exactly the same. I do, however, feel like the color palette is very similar. And as I said, they feel like they exist in the same kind of realm. They give out the same kind of energy. But if you do have the Lonely Dreamer tarot, please let me know if you do pair it up with an oracle deck, let me know which ones you use, because I would be very interested to know. I also look forward to receive the Lenoir oracle, but it is a campaign that has just finished, so I don't think I will get in the deck before 3 to 4 months, and even later than that possibly, I don't know. But in any case, I want to use the tarot now and I don't want to have to wait months to receive the other oracle deck. So again, I am all ears. If you have any recommendations at all for a pairing for this beautiful deck, let me know. It is a very potent, very intense kind of pairing. As you see, I think it jumps out of the cards immediately. But then again, to me, the most important thing is that, it makes sense. It needs to make sense. When I do readings, when I fixate on the meaning of the oracle, and then I look at the tarot, it needs to make sense. And so I feel like these two actually make sense together. But I'm wondering whether if there's an oracle deck with lighter kind of vibes, if that works well with the tarot in such a way that instead of doing shadow work, I could be doing, introspective work or meditation or even inner child. I don't really relate to this deck as an inner child deck though, but I'm always open to suggestions. So that was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.